Welcome back in to the David L. Gray Show, voicing truth and reason. You know, I cannot tell the difference anymore between resisting Pope Francis and constantly bitching about Pope Francis. And the reason why the Resist Francis movement is starting to look and sound like a lather, rinse, and repeat cycle is because somehow they have adopted the tactics of the liberal progressives. G.K. Chesterton in his book Orthodoxy wrote about how progressives claim the name progressive but are unable to prove they're progressing anywhere. Why? Because progressives don't have standards. And the only way you can prove you've made progress is by establishing measurable standards. For example, in high school, my best time as a senior in the 800-meter dash was 2 minutes, 6 seconds. Then as a freshman in college, my best time was 1 minute, 56 seconds. So in 1 year, I had dropped 10 seconds off my time. That was measurable progress. But also measurable progress also has to have a goal or end destination. My goal back then was to make the Olympic trials in Atlanta, a goal I never achieved, but that was why I wanted to progress and get faster. In the case of liberal progressives, they cannot prove how women killing their offspring or men pretending to be women or free will divorce is progress for society. Not only because they have nothing objectively true to measure it against, but measuring it against the divine law would prove them wrong. But also because they have not told us their end destination. Where are we going? We know their end destination is anarchy and hell, but they won't admit that. Likewise, when it comes to the Resist Francis movement, the reason why it has become an echo chamber lately of bitching incessantly about everything Francis does bad and never praising the one or two good things he does occasionally is because they haven't defined their standards or their end destination. The other similarity that the Resist Francis movement has with liberal ideology in the United States is that it's Marxist in a sense, is that it wants to create just a victim class of people so that those who have created it, the managers, the leveragers of this culture, of this community that's been created, can grift off of it and use it to stay in power, to gain wealth. Not saying that everyone has these machinations or bad intentions in the Resist Francis movement, but it is a Marxist principle at play here. It is creating a victim class of people that's teaching them to point to someone other themselves as the problem. That's Marxism. I have even more colorful things to say about this movement that is becoming a poison in our church. This is the best and most honest podcast in Catholicism. It's the David L. Gray Show. Be right back.
Over the skies of a post-Christian society, we have spotted a man with a donut in one hand and rosary beads in another.
Child, I'm about to whoop Satan's behind.
He is boldly proclaiming truth and reason like no rigid Catholic ever has before. The David L. Gray Show begins now.
Now, let's be clear about this first. No one can ever say that David L. Gray is soft on Pope Francis. Because long before it was cool and trendy and safe and profitable to be critical about what Pope Francis is doing, I was doing it. I'm the one who had to resign from my assistant managing editor job at a blog called Catholic Stand over an essay that the managing editor did not like. An essay that today would be considered a slow-pitch softball about Francis. Now, Francis was elected Pope in March of 2013, and from July of 2013 until January 2016, I had written over 17 critical essays. In 2014, I was moving from Warren to Columbus, Ohio, and I was being considered for a director of a religious education job at a parish not far from Columbus. And I had that job until they Googled me, right? Until my Pope Francis essays became my disqualifiers. So I just bring up that background real quick to make the point that I'm one of the original gangsters on this, an OG, one of the godfathers of critiquing the Francis pontificate. And I paid the price. I shed the blood. long before resisting Pope Francis became a grift. But as one of the OGs, it was never about bitching and whining for me. It was always about the theology and whether his reform was based in truth. In fact, I wrote a 4-part series called The Reformation of Pope Francis, which reads prophetically today. The only thing I did not foresee was Pope Francis teaching heresy, which he has a number of times, for example, calling the Holy Eucharist the bread of sinners, and publicly teaching that anyone can worthily receive the Holy Eucharist, including Protestants and people who are in grave sin. I also didn't foresee Pope Francis teaching that God oriented people to be homosexuals, that they were born that way. I mean, how could you foresee such disgusting heresies coming out of the mouth of a pope? No one could have back in 2013 and 2014. And to this day, I still critique things that I find worthy of critique. But I never tell you that we need to resist this papacy, only to be aware. Why? Because I think it's a grift. The whole resisting is leading nowhere, and it's harmful to the faithful. I've talked to a lot of people about the whole resist Francis thing. I even had some people on my podcast ask them about it. I read a lot of essays about it. But the reason why it never set well with my spirit to promote it is because at the essence of it, it was never about doing theology. It wasn't about doing Catholic evangelization. The Resist Francis movement is not Catholic evangelization or Catholic theology. Outside of a couple of formal filings to the Pope to Francis from his peers and from theologians, it was just Catholics bitching about the Pope. And when I saw men engage in this behavior, it didn't appear to me to be masculine either. It smelled effeminate. It looked to me like some soft men who had never been in a street fight crying about how some other man is being mean to them. And nothing against men who have been smart enough or sheltered enough not to ever have to use their fist. But these are not the men we need leading us into the age of martyrdom, because we don't need resistors. We need fighters. Not some guy resisting some bully on his keyboard, or it's like some guy in prison telling everyone in the joint about how bad the bully is. You know, by the end of the week, that guy is going to be either raped or beat to death with a lock in a sock. And you know what everyone will remember at the end? It will be what not to do, what that guy did to get that bully upset. But where are we today? 10 years later, in this beta male feminine age of resistors, not fighters, how is critiquing Pope Francis working out for us? How is Pope name shaming working out, calling him Bergoglio instead of Francis? That changing anything? That you want to engage in such a girly tactic and Pope name shaming? How is not doing intellectual, honest theology working out, but just complaining about him in some sort of unhinged, deranged sort of ways liberals do with Donald Trump? How's that working? Is the resist movement making progress or not? That's a real question. Here's another. Has the resist movement become cultish? It seems to have clear leaders, a creed, and an exclusionary list. Like every cult who repeats the same lies. It seems to have a basic lather, rinse, and repeat cycle of bitching and complaining about everything Pope Francis says, everything. And if the Resist Francis movement is any of these things, it is hurting the church as much as Francis is. And we need to admit that. This is largely an online movement, but it does trickle down into the pews with the pew sitters. Here's one thing we need to admit about the Resist Francis movement. No one takes bitching seriously. No one. Ask any man or woman who is married to someone who complains all day, every day about every freaking thing. It gets to the point that they are complaining about so many things that you don't even know what they're complaining about anymore. It eventually all sounds the same. It sounds like the parents on Charlie Brown. Even the kids in the house who hear the parents complain all the time about everything are confused. Everyone is confused because they don't know how to make progress. How do I stop you from bitching? What's the standard? What's the end goal? Where's the destination? No one knows, not even a spouse who's complaining, and everyone is unhappy. That's the church today. Here's my advice to the Resist Francis movement. If some of you want to resist and not actually fight back, you need standards. You have to learn what to resist, what not to resist. You need to be able to demonstrate how you're progressing, and you need to find an end goal. Otherwise, it's just a grift. Publishing podcasts where you're telling people that Bishop Strickland should still go around and pretend to be the Bishop of Tyler, and we should still recognize him as a legitimate Bishop of Tyler, even if Pope Francis removes him. That's not a goal. If Pope Francis gives Strickland the same treatment he gave Bishop Daniel Fernandez Torres of Puerto Rico by replacing him without permission or cause, yes, Torres is still a successor of the apostles because you can't undo that. But resisting that change with words and by stop giving your money to the church is not a real strategy. So first, get some objectives, some measurable standards, and tell us what your goal is. If it is to depose Francis, then tell us. We need to know where you're headed. Second piece of advice, stop lying. Lying is not a strategy either. Lying is a grift. And one of their main lying grifts I hear all the time is lying about the development of our understanding of the immutable sacredness of human life, which has led to us finding that the death penalty is inconsistent with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But in their unhinged arrangement, they do not read, they don't take the time to read where the church has been on this since the end of World War II, consistently calling for the abolishment of the death penalty throughout the world. And a new understanding of the moral law that we receive from Veritas Splendor, which calls us to see the teachings of Jesus Christ as the light to understand natural law. So when they use arguments such as the death penalty isn't intrinsically evil, no one said that. Idiot, that's a straw man. That we do not know what the word inadmissible means. Idiot. Read the Acts of the Holy See, which was the supporting documentation of that change in paragraph 267. And if the grift was honest, they would tell you that the real reason why they don't like how this teaching has developed our understanding of the immutable sacredness of human life, it's not because they think St. Thomas Aquinas was some sort of pope and that he was infallible. No. It's because this development materialized under Francis. Right? If it had materialized under Benedict XVI, they would have defended it. If they're being honest, if it's not a grift, come on. The grift is also lying to you about the future. No future council is going to declare Francis not to be a pope or a heretic. Why? Because everyone he has created to be cardinal would immediately be disqualified and found to be complicit in the heretical papacy. The law of self-preservation makes that lie of their grift to be untenable. People who believe that a future council will somehow undo Pope Francis' papacy are also the same people who told you that the Supreme Court will undo the fake 2020 election results and put Trump back in office. Same people. My last piece of advice for the resistors of Francis is just to stop. Just stop. Stop. You're wasting your energy, really. Yes, Pope Francis has taught heresy. But as I wrote almost a decade ago, he's not here to change doctrine. He's come to change culture. If you can change Catholic culture, you don't need to change doctrine because you can create a culture that dogmatically believes that dogma doesn't matter. In other words, you can change the culture of the Catholic Church so much that it's no different than the world. And that is the essence of the reform of Francis. He is opening up the doors to reform the culture of the church, to be an image of the deranged culture of the world. That is, to be completely indifferent to the truth. So rather than bitching about Pope Francis, the impact you can have is turning your energies to figuring out how we can facilitate better the process of more people becoming holy and resisting sin in their own lives, because that affects everything afterwards. Seek first ye the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you. But don't let me stop the grift. If it's paying your bills, the truth doesn't matter, right? But for the rest of you, please Live your life like salvation matters. But until then, until next time, blessings and shalom to you and to yours. Thank you for watching the show. For more content, just smash that subscribe button and a notification bell, and you'll be notified whenever I upload new content, hopefully, but not always. You'll get that notification. And also, please consider becoming a sponsor of the show. You can do this a couple ways, either by going over to patreon.com/David L. Gray, and just for a couple dollars a month, you'll have access to all of our exclusive content over at stdominicsmedia.com, or become a YouTube member of this channel. And again, for just a couple of dollars a month, you'll have access to all the content on this YouTube channel that is older than 5 months. But either way, please keep me in your prayers and I'll keep you in mind. And remember that Jesus loves you and is there for you. Thank you.